Good morning. Good morning. It's Sunday, January 12th, and it's been fairly quiet as far as solar flares go. So, I'm going to give you an update on the solar flares, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about uncertainty, right? A lot about uncertainty and what's going on, and bring in this full moon tomorrow. So, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for watching this. And again, if you haven't subscribed, or like this or left a comment, please do that too. I would love to hear from you. And you can always ask me questions or give me some suggestions about what to talk about next week. Because, I start about Wednesday and start pulling this together. Okay. So it's been really quiet, like beyond quiet with the solar flares. So I have this for you, which is the graph that, this is going to be in the C's, this is going to be the M's and the X's. And so we've been bouncing around, in low C's, C1, C2. We even had a B9. I was like, I haven't seen a B listed in so long. Hi, Carol. I'm so glad you're here. We haven't had a B listed that I wrote to Pam Youngins and was like, wait, what? We have a B class? Because it's just so much lower than after this pummeling that we had last week, right? So we've had a couple of M's. We had an M on Monday and on Tuesday and on Thursday. And then as you can see, we're 2 days into this C class, this really quiet. The yellows are going to be C, and those big dark purple ones are going to be those X flares that we had. And that's just registering the highest, not the number of X flares. Okay. So I thought that was interesting as well. Okay. So we're still getting those little nudges like tap, 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 time, C class. Every time we have a little C class, it comes in and goes like, hey, 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 hey. It just means pay attention. And there's other pieces of information going on, right? And we have those tower moments with the M's, which is where information is just going to come in and enlighten us. And one of the things that I didn't do was grab, I'm not going to be able to put my hands on it. It's the tower card from the light seers, which I like, which is in nature. All of the animals are sort of watching these beams of light coming down and lighting up a tree and sort of going like, wow, what's going on? And I feel like that's what we've been doing, is getting information from a lot of different sources and going like, I don't know what to do with this information, right? And then on top of that, we have these external disasters, whether it's the fires in Los Angeles, whether it's the earthquakes that have been registering, one in San Francisco, different ones around the world. Resignations going on politically. We've got the inauguration coming. We've got like just this swirl of physical things happening in our external world. And it makes sense that uncertainty is the main sort of issue, the main energy, because the world is very ambiguous right now, and it's moving around. And those of us who are used to change, who thrive on change, like me, are going like, wow, it's getting kind of interesting because the things that I thought were solid anchors are changing. Now, I can imagine that that would be terrifying to someone who is not good with change, who doesn't let go very easily, right? Because we're dismantling, we're revealing, we're discovering new information constantly. And when we're doing this, what's happening is it's creating a world that isn't certain, that we don't know what's going on. It rocks our perceptions. Like, we've always done it this way, especially if you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80. We know how the world has operated before in the past. If you're younger, thank goodness, you're 20, 30, even in your early 40s, you're looking around going, oh, this is getting interesting because things have been changing so rapidly in my lifetime, right? Our known and learned information is starting to fail us. Our mainstream media is starting to be questioned. Our, for their valid points, for being able to back up what anyone is saying with documented information, rather than in that egregore, that sort of feeling of fear, feeling of information. And we brought up the egregore last week. So if you don't know what that is, look it up and then go back and watch last week's video, because it was really cool. It shows us where we are, where we're going, right? And where we're set and where we're rigid. And I'm noticing that there's, being an intuitive for in a highly sensitive person for years, probably since I was 2, 3, 4 years old, that I can become very rigid in my routines because that rigidity helps me understand how to get through the day. Here are my anchors. I know what time to get up. I know what time to have breakfast. I know what foods to eat to help my body. I know what kind of work works for me. So my rigidity is being shook as well, and I would imagine that's happening to you because what's happening is it's showing us where we're crumbling, where the world around us has to sort of fall down and go away the way we know it. So of course, it's going to bring up anger, it's going to bring up fear, it's going to bring up blame. It's their fault if this hadn't happened. So watch when we're going into those blame cycles, when we're incredibly frustrated and we feel like we're being thrown around by an external force that we don't like, or people that we don't like, and we've become very segmented into I believe this and you're wrong, or I believe this and you're wrong, and that isn't working because what we're clinging to is what we've been taught and what we learned and what has been normal in our world for the last 50 to 75 to 100 and 20 years. Because when we came into the turn of the century in the 1900s, when we went into industrialization, a lot of things changed in our world as far as what the nuclear family looks like, what public education looks like, what the economy looks like, how politics are run, how medical services are provided. So go back and look at those timeframes because what I'm going to go back to that egregore, which is that non-physical sort of collective belief system that once it's held by a group of people becomes its own entity, becomes its own vehicle, right? So that said, tomorrow we have a full moon in Cancer. I love, Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. Cancer is a cardinal sign. So it's the leadership of water. And Cancer is ruled by the moon. So we have all this really powerful moon energy. So the sun is in Capricorn. We're in the Capricorn zodiac. And the sun coming up, the moon coming up is in Cancer. I like this one because what it shows in the light seers is that she's fallen into the water and she feels like sinking. She doesn't know what to do. And yet the light of the moon is coming down and encouraging her to come back up to the surface. That's why I chose this card for us for right now. Because, interestingly enough, water in a cardinal sign is water leadership, right? So with all these other planets that are going on, Mars and Neptune and Uranus, they're all sort of pulling. What we're looking about is emotional knowledge, right? And so what I wanted to do was talk about how when we have emotional knowledge, we have vibrational information coming in that we start to absorb. This is the High Priestess. So within the 0 through 21 cards of the major arcana, this is the second major skill as a human that we have, is our ability to read vibration and bring in information through our pineal gland. Here's what the light seer shows us as far as the High Priestess, right? And then what I like is the Roig deck, which is, this shows you what the High Priestess looks like in his deck. So here are 3 versions. I think it's a her deck, actually. I'm going to have to double check on that. Here are 3 versions of what's happening to us. Our emotional knowledge, our energy in motion, our recognition and validation of information is being amped up. And I used amped up last week, so I didn't want to bring that up again, right? So I think it's interesting that when you have the High Priestess coming in, that this is what the Queen of Cups looks like. She has all this information coming in. This is what the Knight of Cups looks like in Osho. You're just in full trust mode, going towards anything, trusting that the emotional risk that you're taking is unknown, and you're still ready to dive into it, right? Because we are programming our spiritual and emotional knowledge and skills right now. We are being lit up and downloaded into and saying, hey, remember some of these skill sets that you have and remember how powerful that they are, because they're helping us come on board to navigate forward. So when we have this kind of information, what's happening is we're busting through some of these old structures. We're breaking the chains and bringing in fire and water, and we're starting to sort of bring in that alchemical, which is, I don't know that everything I've seen has been true up to this point, and I don't know that if it's true, if it isn't changing. That's where we are right now, which is like, oh no, there's a whole lot of information that's coming in and changing us right now because we are releasing some of these conditions, some of these learnings, some of these programmings that we've had. So what's happening is that our most powerful skill is that of the observer, the one that notices patterns, the ones that can sort of go like, well, this and this and this are the same. How come I never caught that one before? Right? Because when we're uncertain, when we want to amp up or grow our knowledge, we go to the observer and we notice patterns, because patterns are really the only thing within an energetic field that we can observe, patterns that shift. That's why I'm teaching tarot. It's so important to look at what are the patterns, what are the relationships that keep showing up that inform us, right? Because what happens is it helps us ignore the noise. It helps us ignore the old controls, the old egregores, the old statements, like what happens when mainstream news says this is what you have to believe. And we're like, yeah, but look at his eyes, look at her eyes, look at the information, look at the repetitive. And you can see some of the patterns aren't lining up anymore. So as our high levels of observer are coming on board, we're starting to see the holes that are crumbling, or the holes that are happening in the ways that institutions and information that we've held on to as known and learned is starting to crumble. Makes sense, right? When we look and we notice patterns, we explore control, we explore the collapsing of it, we explore where energy flows, right? We explore what it looks like when it's coming in, when we can be in the flow of it, right? And it is all water and emotional energy. So, here we are. Maybe you're sensitive. Maybe you have empathic skills. Maybe you're an energy reader. You can read rooms, and you notice patterns. You're an independent exploring something in a world that doesn't understand, or hasn't up until now understood who you are, what you have to offer, and what your skills are, right? Because then I'm going to take this last piece before I go to tips, which is we begin to communicate with each other. And I loved the idea when I just go to the dictionary and look up communicate, which is to convey information, to make aware, to make known, to spread, to impart, to reveal with clarity, to share and exchange. And so it's done through speaking and writing and body movement and signals, right? It's so interesting. And it's done through energetic vibration. So when we realize that the way we communicate isn't just through words and writing, that the way we communicate is how we put out energy, right? Then what we begin to do is normalize that and go, well, this is just who I am. This is what I know to do, because I'm bringing my invisible skills forward, and to allow and to spread, to make connections in energy, in patterns, and to make them known. This is what's happening. So when we look at the Cancer full moon and the fact that Mars is sort of fueling it up, and I'm going to go through some of this too, the idea that we are energetically being freed and saying self-nurture and take care of yourself, and we have a nice quiet lull right now, it's time to do that. I love that. I love the way it all falls together. Okay, so I have 6 tips for you today. And before I go to the tips, number 1, we have a discussion on Tuesday the 14th. You can sign up for my Patreon, which I would love. It's $11 a month, and you could come to every Tuesday. And then we also have an ongoing chat, and we have this growing group of some of the most interesting humans. I love this group. Would love for you to come and be part of it. You can also click on the Acuity link and come in if you don't want to do Patreon, and just do it as a once or twice and see if you like it. The second thing is that for those of you who are signing up for my Patreon, I really appreciate the support. It's lovely to have an ongoing reflection of support coming back for me as I'm going out independent, right? Navigating through all of this and creating a form of trust. Like, this is the kind of information I want to teach more and I want to bring forward. And then that said, if you find value with this, there's a way within my comments below to buy me a cup of coffee, send me some money on Venmo or PayPal. And I always appreciate, with such deep appreciation and gratitude, those who send me resources to keep going. So thank you. All right. Tip number 1, the door is opening, right? Our invisible skills are being activated. And so what we want to do is we want to validate those. We want to self-validate and say, and start to step towards, I know who I am. I know what my skills are. And you want to be able to say this internally, like, man, I'm highly sensitive. I am, I can read rooms. I've been able to read rooms since I was a child. So when I go through the list of clairs, what I can tell you is that I'm a clairsentient. I read energy strings between people, places, and things. I'm a clairvoyant. I see things. I'm a claircognizant. Things drop into my head and I know them, and I can't tell you how I know them. I just know them, right? And I'm also a clair agent, which means that I can use clair agency to go feel into an environment. It's not remote viewing. It's that I can feel it in my body, and then my knowing and my sight and my feelings come on board. So number 1, validate your internal skills. Get to know them and start saying, I am this, I am that. This is what I know how to do. Okay. That way we start to build this normalization, right? This ability to go like, yeah, doesn't everybody do that? And get really, really grounded and cool with this, right? Number 2, maybe print off a list of the clairs. Go make your own list of all of the clairs. Go in and look at the DOES of the high levels of sensitivity. Look at the invisible energetic skills and normalize them, right? Bring them into your communication. Talk about them with each other. So what you're like, oh yeah, well, when I feel into this, this is what I understand now. When I've been able to look and see the patterns, then these are the questions I have about the patterns. So what we are doing is we're normalizing the skill sets that we use every day to bring information in, but we're communicating it, right? We bring it into our communications and we talk about them with each other, and we find other like-minded souls where we can talk about it so we can begin to normalize that with ourselves as well. So, in some ways, it's almost like pretend you're at Hogwarts and all of you are in school and you're studying. Hey, I did this today. Hey, I did this today. What did you notice? And practice your observations. Practice your invisible skills, right? Number 3, advocate. Bring your skills, tools, and abilities with you into your external world. Ooh, this is a big one. It's like, into my external world. Wait, you want to talk about this with my partner? You want me to talk about this with my family? You want me to talk about this at work, in my social environments? And it's like, hell yes. This is where we begin to normalize dialogues like, when I check in and I get this consistent feeling, this is what I'm picking up on. So what you do is you advocate for that by remembering to be courageous and badass, kind of like this dragon. Because one of the things I forgot to put down, that's really interesting. I don't know where. Oh, here it is. It said, our full moon in Cancer is also the last moon in the year of the dragon. And so the full moon in Cancer is like self-care, self-nurturing, and the dragon is self-empowerment and spiritual transformation. So when we look at how powerful this moon is coming in from both the Chinese and the traditional zodiac, it's fascinating, right? All right. Let's see. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I got them out of order, so I'm going to be a mess on this one. Is to practice. Practice your observer. Practice being quiet. Like sometimes when I go to the coffee shop, I get in the back corner and I just watch, and then I gather information. So observe and gather, and then double check with your own energy system. Did I just see that? I'm starting to notice this, this, and this. And then what I do is I ask my body. I ask my guides. I ask my higher self, is this what I'm seeing? And I do yes and no's. Body is a pendulum. So I collect and I validate and I double check and I explore and I share and communicate, right? And and the next one on the advocating, or the one that we talked about before was advocating, was when we begin to advocate these skills, we start to say things to people that don't have any experience in them, and yet they sort of blossom out and they broaden their information, they broaden their skill sets. So an example I would use is that there's a group of us that meet in the morning at the coffee shop, and I'm like the only one that they would say is woo, right? But I've always been like that, and I've always kept my mouth shut and just sort of listened to sports or stocks or this or that. And then now I'm starting to put in, I feel, I see, what about this, what if. And I'm noticing some pushback with some, and I'm also noticing some leaning in with others. And I'm like, oh, this is so much fun to start learning how to communicate, right? And number 5, remember, we are unlearning. We are unlearning old programs. We're shaking off the chains, right? We're moving away from all of this. We're just busting through these chains of control, change of institutions, change of education, change of what we were taught was normal, what we were taught was not normal. Because as creatives, as sensitives, as energy readers, we are not within the, what do we want to call it, population of the normal kids in school, and have not been recognized as as how powerful our skill sets are. And now they're coming on board, right? So we use our navigational tools, and our emotional wisdoms, and we bring them forward as a skill set on a day-to-day basis. So we remember, I'm not just making this shit up. I'm remembering who I am. I'm putting the feminine, this masterful, energetic feminine, and it comes through the priestess, right? Into Back into flow, back into an equal 50% of the perspectives and ways that we gather information. Okay. And last, number 6, always have compassion. Have compassion because, wow, just have a lot of compassion, because you're changing, your family's changing, people are stepping back, people are stepping forward. All of this is a result of having very high levels of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and a lot of change all at once. So that said, I will see you Tuesday in discussion, or I will see you next Sunday. Take care.